Melinda,
Hi.
you got me looking at my phone.
Oh no. How
Oh,
embarrassing.
oh noes.
I feel like weird, like there's an elephant in the room.
Really? Because it looks like a camera,
Ah!
and it's only got three legs.
so,
Doesn't have one of those long noses. It's
yeah,
also not really gray.
or great.
It's not even an elephant. How you been?
I've been, pretty good. Pretty good.
Cool.
Cool. I had Mexican food for dinner.
So did I.
It's a weird
I didn't
coincidence.
have a burrito tonight. I
No,
had enchilada.
me too.
I had three of them
Wow.
at the same time.
Did you like stack them on top?
No, I cut them up with a knife, like real dainty,
Got it.
and brought it. You brought it up to my face with a fork.
Got it.
Chomp.
That's
Quite
hot.
nice. Quite nice.
All right. Well, hopefully people can hear us. I know I already told you guys this, but we will not be able, or at least will not be able to watch the chat in real time because, as you will find, uh,
She's got a lot of stuff to
I
say,
got a lot of
guys.
notes. I have a lot of little notes.
I saw a glimpse of the note binder that you brought with you tonight, and I was just like, "Holy cow! This
You
is
were
like a
like, what could she possibly have to say about this
this is
topic
like
that
a
goes on that long?
college lecture of a topic tonight."
Sorry.
So, what are we talking about?
So,
Speaking of the elephant in the room,
welcome to Dreamland, the Retro Blasting Podcast. My name is Melinda,
and I'm Aaron.
and tonight we are talking about the alien autopsy.
Shut your mouth.
It's
Really?
true.
Yeah.
It's
Oh
not
boy.
true, but it's true.
Is it true?
Yeah.
Spoilers.
the the secret surprise ending is that it's actually true,
Yeah,
and I
like
found the proof.
I mean, I wouldn't be surprised if you did. Like, you
It
went
feels like
full
I should have.
kale off, kale off, kale F on this one.
I feel like I did. Um, so all right, let's just dive into this because we got a lot to cover.
Okay.
And
So first of all, ground rules, right? How do you want to do this? Because normally I'm super interrupted. You said you wanted to make sure that you kind of covered it in an order.
no, you interrupt
Okay.
as much as you want.
All right. Challenge accepted.
If it, I know you did different kinds of, you went down different avenues that I did, which is the joy of our podcast.
Yeah.
So when something gets to that point, I'm going very chronologically because there are so many players involved in this and so many things that if you don't adhere to some kind of structure, it quickly gets away from you. So I have a few slides that will help show what I'm talking about, and so we'll go through it and then just jump in where you see fit, and I will pause and let you have the floor.
You got it. As you can see now, there isn't a whole lot of floor.
Okay, so Ray Santilli.
That one I know.
Yep.
Yes.
So Ray Santilli, this is him. It's a more recent photo of Ray. Uh, and he was born in 1958 in London. He's about 62 years old now. And I'm telling you that for a reason. So
I would say that picture. He's a young looking 62.
uh, in 1974, he became a musician. He was a record producer, a music distributor. Then in 1982, he founded AMP Entertainment and handled the exclusive rights to Disney soundtracks in the UK. And then
That's a
in
pretty big bona fide. That's not one I picked up on.
yeah, and then in 1991, he founded something called the Merlin Group, which specialized in re-recording of hits with original artists.
Okay.
So, along with marketing a number of different TV specials. And then in 1994, he formed Orbital Media, where he produced a number of TV documentaries and film. And that was 1 year before the whole Alien Autopsy film came out. So that just sort of gives you a little bit of background on who he is. So,
So
by all,
very heavy music background.
absolutely. So, by all accounts, he was a friendly, mild mannered businessman who generally profited from re releasing things made by other artists.
Okay.
So, he wasn't himself a creator, he was more of a compiler and distributor
Yeah,
and
that tracks with
moneymaker.
what I read about him in other places.
Yeah, yeah. So, our story begins basically in July of 1992. So, at that time, he visited Cleveland, Ohio with his friend Gary Shoefield. or Schofield. I'm not sure how that's pronounced. I've heard it both ways, so I'm just going to call him Gary. That's his friend who works for Polygram.
Okay.
And they were looking for music, particularly something like an Elvis type of music thing that they could do for another one of his compilations things, right? So this is Gary. And Gary and he both clearly shop at the same eyeglass place.
Apparently, I do too. A little bit, it looks
No,
like.
I mean, I feel like maybe these were from the early aughts or something, maybe.
Yeah, they're a little thicker rimmed for those of you who can't see the slide.
Yeah. So,
But still a sharp looking dude.
yeah.
Like the choice of a blue
he's got
shirt.
the very narrow rectangular glasses.
Mhm.
So anyway, while he was there, he says, or he said at the time, that he was contacted by this 82-year-old former freelance cameraman who was a cameraman in like the 40s and 50s. And he says the guy's name was Jack Barnett,
Okay.
which I think he said at the time was a fake name because he was trying to
He was a
hide
little
the identity.
subterfuge.
He was trying to protect the identity of his source, is what he said. And this 82-year-old man had this footage that he had shot of Elvis back in that time period, like some of the first in the 50s, some of the earliest footage that was ever shot of Elvis. I believe it was in 1955. And so he said, yeah, I want to buy that. So he did. And then Jack then also mentions that he may have something else that they would like. And so Jack shows him the alien footage purported to be from the Roswell crash from 1947.
Yep, there's a lot of stuff going on behind the scenes here, because that Roswell crash happened and it was already news. When I was a kid, I still remember even in the late 80s seeing specials on TV about the Roswell crash, talking about the different materials that were found there and just some of the stuff. And even then, even as a kid, I was like, it'd be fun to believe, but this just doesn't seem quite right. I think something did happen there. I mean, not being an expert, I'm not a UFOologist. Ufologist. You follow me? But I do remember that even before hearing about the alien autopsy.
Yeah.
And I know we didn't do like where did you first encounter the idea of the alien autopsy thing. I think it was something for me. It was later on. I would hear friends talk about it like it was this sort of, I don't know, like Faces of Death kind of thing. Like I didn't realize it was just on Fox, and everybody could just watch it on TV.
So you didn't come across it when it aired?
No, I didn't see it when it aired.
Okay.
I've definitely watched it now.
I have now too, but I feel like I don't remember if I watched it at the time, but I do remember with my skeptical brain at the time thinking, this is fake.
Whatever happened to that skeptical brain, Melinda?
I know. So there was also this whole thing about how, they were in Cleveland, but apparently
Cleveland?
The guy said, well, because that's where Elvis had been at the time that this footage was shot. Like apparently he knew that Elvis had performed at all these schools in that area. And so he was going there thinking that somebody in the local area there may have filmed some stuff.
Okay, because I was just wondering, like, what causes a clearinghouse kind of a film producer to just target Cleveland in America, fly over here and just start there. But it makes sense that if he's tracking Elvis's early career, he would just go canvas and just see if he could find somebody at the Rotary Club.
There was a guy that we will get to. There's a reason really why, but he didn't say what that reason was initially.
Okay.
So, but he went there on the 4th of July weekend because it was a long weekend, holiday weekend, and he thought more people might be around that he could get in touch with to kind of...
No, it's all making sense because everybody would be gathering. He could go out and he could just meet people and ask questions.
Yeah.
So
yeah,
I'm following you. I'm tracking.
All right. So this guy, Jack, supposedly says, I don't have any of this stuff with me. You're going to have to come down to Florida. He didn't go to the 4th
of July party?
I'm from Florida. I flew all the way up here for some reason. Or maybe in some versions of the story, it was just the son who was in that area, and Ray got on an internal flight in the U.S. from Cleveland down to Florida.
Okay.
I think it's Clearwater, Florida, where the guy lives.
That is a place.
And and saw the footage, and then he flew back. So his friend Gary did not go with him to Florida and did not ever see that footage himself. So the only person who saw the footage on the 16 millimeter reel to reels was Ray.
Okay.
Okay. So that was 1992, but Ray did not, he says, yes, I'd love to buy this footage, but the guy wanted a good amount of money for it. It changes how much money he wanted for it, but Ray didn't have that money at the time. So he was like, let me go to some investors, get some money together, and we'll get back to you. So the guy's like, cool.
Okay.
So 1993, let's go ahead and skip over. Go to 1993. So this is the year initially that Santilli said he went to the United States. So initially, when he first told the story, he said he went to the US in 93, but it was actually 92. I have no idea why he either lied about that or got confused about that, but whatever. So
well, yeah, the 90s, man.
in 93, right, he purchased the Elvis footage and the alien autopsy footage.
So he didn't have the money for either when he went the first time. He just came to America.
Again, there are so many. This is why I got confused, right? So there are so many versions of these stories, depending on, even if you're only looking at Ray's account of the things, it changes every time he tells a story. And so it's very difficult to get a timeline going.
Okay, so here's what I love about this. When
Okay.
I looked at this footage, I was looking for all kinds of technical reasons where I could be critical of it. Like, this is why it's not real. This, the clock, look at the different things in the room, try to play that old clue game
Yeah.
to figure it out. And then, just sitting down here, I'm realizing that you found like a very like lawyerly, I don't know, like investigatory way to kind of do this, where now we're looking at the timelines and the actual way that this came about.
Uh-huh.
And it's already starting to feel very out of focus. Like, I can't.
Pun intended.
Yeah. Well, okay. Yeah. That is one of the criticisms of the video. If you've seen it, it is streaming right now. If you want to go check it out, by the way, wait till we're done.
Yeah.
Or pause and come back.
That would be great.
Through the magic of the internet.
Mm-hmm.
You can do that. Anyway, please continue.
So later in 1993, Ray contacts Philip Mantle. So Philip Mantle is here.
So he's purchased the Elvis footage and the
again, maybe sometime around this time he purchased.
I'm just going with the assertions that he's made thus far in your retelling of the story.
So yes, he purchased it. This is Philip. I'm going to call him either Philip or Mantle, because it's whatever. But
now, are you going to include some of these in the show notes section for?
Absolutely,
okay,
yeah.
Because I know there's going to be plenty of people who are
I'll
just
put
listening.
the photos in the show notes, as well as all of my sources. Philip is an important source because Philip wrote the book that I took many of my notes from. He did a very exhaustive book about this, which I read most of. It's like over 500 pages long, and he really goes into a lot of detail, way more detail than I'm going to go into. But Philip was the press officer for the British UFO Research Association, also known as BUFORA.
Mm-hmm.
So he is a ufologist, and this is the thing that I really took away from all of this, is that a lot of ufologists, if you're someone who's not into that kind of thing, and you just kind of write off UFOs and Bigfoots and all that kind of stuff as being like, he's very skeptical himself, and is very like, we need to rigorously test these things to make sure that it's legit.
It reminds me a lot of James Randi and his institution, and we just lost James Randi, I think, last year, but he ran a skeptical institute that was looking for things that were supernatural and providing like a bounty for it. But he approached every claim to have ESP or something like that by applying the scientific method to it, with the reward to actually having it being, I think, $1 million. So it was drawing all these people in, and it wasn't that he didn't necessarily believe in the phenomena, but it was like he wanted to go about establishing it correctly, and not through just like fantastic claims or blurry video or things like that.
Right.
So it sounds like he's sort of in the same vein.
Kind of, yeah. So he was contacted by Ray, and Ray asked him if he could help him do a UFO documentary. So at this time, now again, I'm going to contradict myself, but it's not me, it's Ray. he's still trying to raise the money to purchase the footage. So maybe this happened before he managed to make it back to the States. Like maybe this was earlier in 1993. I really couldn't get a lot of solid dates.
Is this the result of like a lot of interviews?
Yes.
Okay.
Lots of
That may
interviews.
explain why these things feel a lot more out of order.
Yeah. But I did my best, guys. So Philip said that Ray didn't yet have the money to purchase the footage, so he doesn't have it at that point, but he's trying to at least engage conversation. He hasn't told Mantle, Philip, that he has this footage. He's just saying he wants to do a UFO documentary. So Philip's like, yeah, sure, that's fine. Eventually, in conversations on the phone or via letters, because this is the 90s, he told him that he had some footage, but he wouldn't let Philip see it.
Okay.
And so eventually, after multiple requests of him, he's like, I've got this alien autopsy footage. And Mantle's like, well, I want to see it.
Well, yeah.
And he's like, yeah, you can't see it.
Well, and they're both living in England, right?
Correct.
So it's
they're
not
both
like
in London area. Now, I believe Philip lives like 2 hours north of London, where Ray is centered in London, but still
manageable.
Very manageable. So eventually Philip says, I don't really believe, he makes it clear that he doesn't really believe Ray, and they kind of just stop talking about it.
So he feels like he's getting sold here.
Yeah.
A bit.
So by the time summer rolls around, 1993, we're still in 93, there is a movie that gets released called Fire in the Sky.
Mm-hmm.
Are you familiar with Fire in the Sky?
I remember hearing about it.
Okay, so it's
not one that I spent a lot of time looking at.
It's understandable. It's a
look at that mustache.
American biopic science fiction mystery film.
Okay.
That's what it said on Wikipedia, I believe. It says it's based on Travis Walton's book, The Walton Experience.
Okay.
Which describes an extraterrestrial abduction. So basically, this is a guy, I believe it's his brother or brother-in-law, who is also involved in the writing of the book and being in the film. And he sort of witnessed him getting abducted by these aliens. And this, I believe, happened in the 70s or early 80s. I can't recall. I saw it a long time ago. So Travis Walton, the guy who is the subject of the movie, is brought over. He's on a tour for the movie, and he's in London area. And so Philip is like, hey, let's do a lecture for our UFO group at the London Business School. Well, Ray hears about this, and Ray is like, I need to reconnect. So they meet for the very first time in person at this Fire in the Sky lecture. And not much came of it, though, because Santilli still wouldn't allow Mantle to see the film.
That just sounds so shifty.
So a lot of time passes. So we get to late 1994. Santilli Ray manages to gather the cash needed and regain Jack's trust, Jack being his cameraman, his mysterious cameraman in Florida.
Mm-hmm.
And that's when, in one of these stories, he bought the footage. So
that lines up with the research that I did. It sounds like there's a lot that throws shade on that, though.
I know for a fact, well, I don't actually, but I know that Ray had to have had this footage before the beginning of 1995.
Okay.
So by early 95, he definitely had obtained
some footage,
the entirety of the 16 millimeter reels. Now, these are black and white 16 millimeter reels. They're about 15 to 22 cans. Mm-hmm. Just depends, again, on the story that you're hearing, the time that he's told it. And he purportedly paid around $100,000 to $150,000 for this footage.
Wow.
That's what he said.
And that's 90s money.
In the 90s, right. So still early 1995, through some of his music industry contacts, Santilli becomes aware of this guy named Reg Presley. Now, Reg Presley was the lead singer of a group called the Trogs, who were big in the 60s, and they did a song I'm sure you've all heard of called Wild Thing.
Yep.
Dun, dun, dun.
Now it's stuck in my head.
Yeah. So he had a new song that was in some 90s movie that I can't remember, that was it wasn't him doing it, but it was another band covering one of his other songs. And so he was in the news again anyway. And anyway, Reg was super into crop circles and UFOs. And Santilli thought, well, this would be a good person. I know him through my music content. I know somebody who knows him, you know, and maybe he can see my footage that I just got and tell me what he thinks of it, since he's super into this stuff. And Ray himself was not really into UFOs. He didn't know a lot about the Roswell crash by his telling of the story. And so Santilli, Ray, I'll just call
That
him
doesn't
Ray.
make any sense. Like nothing makes any sense so far.
Ray contacts this guy, cold calls him, and says, "Hey, I've got this really amazing UFO footage. I know you're really into this stuff. Would you come to my office and watch the film and let me know what you think?"
But he wouldn't show any to this other guy.
Not at that time.
Okay.
They've kind of fallen out of contact, right?
Right.
So Reg is the very first person to see any of this film.
Okay.
Now, keep in mind that the film is not being shown on a reel-to-reel. Okay, it's been transferred to video.
All right, so it's on some kind of tape.
It's on a VHS tape that is being played on a VCR in an office. Okay. He has the reel-to-reels all in cans laying on the floor with these stickers on them with labels and stuff like that that look like they're from the 40s and all of that. But you're not opening them and looking at the film and holding it up to the light. You're just saying, here's the cans and here's the VHS tape.
Okay.
Okay.
I'm gonna be saying that a lot tonight, I think. Okay.
Okay. So he was shown something called the tent footage, and I'll explain what that means in just a second. So what it showed was a creature that was inside of like a tent. It was very, very dark, hard to see, and the creature was covered with a sheet, and there are some doctors and people running around him doing different kinds of examinations and just moving stuff around. It's really hard to make anything out in this film. And so Mantle contacts Santilli again, Mantle being the ufologist. And he's just like, hey, you know, he had some other thing coming up, and he was like, hey, whatever happened with that footage? So he calls him up again, and this time Ray says, yeah, you can see the film. In fact, I'll give you a copy.
Oh, sure, yeah. It's only nearly $200,000 worth to obtain this, but let me just
not original. It's a VHS,
but it's still the footage.
Yeah.
I'm just all of this just seems a little fast and loose.
What do you mean?
It just seems fast and loose to me. I'm having a hard time following. Like,
It's
all right,
great.
then just keep going because I'll.
He just says, "Don't show this in public. I trust you."
Sure.
Just I'm gonna let you take it. So anyway, over time,
No paperwork.
Philip sees a total of 4 different films. Okay.
Okay.
One was called the tent footage that I just talked about, which was dark and hard to see. The second one was an alien autopsy, in which the alien had no damage to the body that was discernible, and they did a gynecologic exam on the body. The third one is another alien autopsy, which is the one that we saw on Fox.
Okay.
And then the fourth one is called debris footage, and it supposedly showed it's one where in some examples you could see President Truman behind the glass and you could see his lips moving. You could read his lips and see what he was saying. It shows, you know, a crane like moving the
well, that sounds
UFO.
like the cool footage.
Yeah, exactly. So anyway, Philip, when he goes down and visits Ray and in his office, he's always accompanied by his wife Sue, who is also a member of Bufora. So the both of them are interviewed in the book, and they talk about what they saw. At the time, Santilli said he was making and releasing his own documentary and asked Mantle if he would be a consultant. So Mantle agreed to do that, and then he thought that the footage may be real, but he still did want to validate it because, like I said, he's Mr. Check all the facts. Some other people also were going to Santilli's office at that time, and they were given copies. Some of them were given different copies of things too. And those are the people who said that they were told that the footage contained a scene with President Truman.
So they were just told that. They didn't necessarily get the footage.
Yeah,
that
no one ever
that.
saw that, but some people were told that the other tape had that.
Sounds like rumors starting, but
yeah.
So I'm guessing the tent footage is out there to find, theoretically, if that was what was handed out on VHS tapes.
I mean,
I'll wait to see if
the tent footage for sure. Philip Mantle has that. He has
right.
a copy.
But the other stuff, it sounds like there was never any actual example.
I don't believe anyone's ever seen the debris. Well, there is debris footage actually. It's just not there's nothing that has that part of it on there.
Yeah, I mean, I won't speculate on that yet because I feel like we're getting to where that might be more beneficial.
So on January 14th, Reg went on to a BBC morning show and told them about this tent footage that he had seen, the dark footage. And this was the first that the public had heard of that video. But
was he speaking out of school here?
A little bit.
Okay.
Not a big reaction was obtained because it was a really small show and very few people heard the interview. So around March, Santilli also agreed to let Mantle show some footage at an upcoming UFO conference in August. And that was mentioned as Philip is doing all the press for his conference coming up that August.
Mm-hmm.
He mentions to a reporter accidentally, he kind of let it slip out casually, that he's got this cool alien autopsy thing that he's going to show. And the story just immediately went viral. That's where it went viral. And it was Philip who kind of let the cat out of the bag.
Snap.
And so it had started off in a British paper called the Sunday People, and it just also announced.
Now I want to name like a mod band, the Sunday People.
And
everybody's eating ice cream.
It said Santilli was the owner. So because of that, a guy named Bob Kvyat, who is on screen here, came to hear about the alien autopsy footage because of all that going viral. He was working for Omni magazine and was setting up his own TV production company called Kvyat Productions, specializing in unexplained phenomena. He used to work on unsolved mysteries. And so he finally connected directly with Ray Santilli via Reg Presley, our good friend Reg.
Sounds like he's the broker for a lot of these.
Yeah, he's like a California dude. Like, he's a Hollywood guy. So Santilli agrees to come to LA and meet with him and some potential TV buyers for this footage. Unfortunately, Santilli flaked out on that at the last minute and didn't get on the plane. And so Kvyat...
We're talking about a guy who flew to Ohio just to like try to find people who might have footage of Elvis.
Yeah.
Flakes out on a flight to go start a bidding war for something that could be very lucrative. I'm sensing some cold feet and just maybe he doesn't have it. Like maybe it doesn't exist in his possession at that moment. So they've got the tent footage and there's rumors of this other footage, but he's never produced the actual alien autopsy footage that we saw in the Fox video, right?
He has shown that to
Philip?
Our friend Philip. Yes.
Okay. So Philip can vouch that he's
Philip's seen all 4 of the tapes, but the the debris footage, for example, doesn't have a crane lifting a UFO or President Truman on it.
Yeah.
It's just a bunch of stuff.
I mean, that would be a big deal.
It's a bunch of stuff.
Yeah.
I have a slide of it later.
It's debris.
Yeah.
Looks like Chernobyl.
So Kvyat is eventually convinced to come over for a screening in London on May 5th.
Okay.
So 5/5. Santilli,
thank you, that helps.
Yep. Santilli says they will be showing the film to a group on this date and that would be the best way for him to see it. So he's not happy about it, but he agrees to go ahead and come over in May to come and see it. But by this point, with all the back and forth and the flakiness, he's kind of doubtful about Santilli. He's not real sure. So on May 4th, the day before this big thing, Kvyat arrives in London.
May 4th, which is just a day, right? Not a special day, just a normal day. That's what I've heard.
Yeah.
Okay, it's the day before day 5th. That's what makes it special.
That is what makes it special. So Kvyat arrives there in London for the screening, and he's met at his hotel immediately by Ray and Gary.
Were they just in a bush?
They were just like, yes. They jumped out and they were like,
that's odd.
It's not weird at all.
That's not necessarily what happened, by the way. I was just...
They took him to their office to see the alien autopsy.
They had an office at the hotel?
They have an office there in London.
Okay,
yes.
got it.
He was expecting to see the really dark tent footage because that's kind of what people had told him more about. Reg had told him about that and whatever, but that's not what he saw. He was shown the film that we all saw on Fox.
Wait, so this is May 4th, 1995.
Mm-hmm.
That is a very short amount of time to produce something.
Oh yeah,
of that
we're
caliber.
Literally going to be going day by day at this point.
This is exciting.
Is it?
I'm glad I brought water.
Would you like some water?
No, I've got my own. Okay. Thank you. I'm not really sure what's in the water you're drinking, but go right ahead.
So he was told about the debris footage as well. Not sure why he wasn't shown it, but he was told that If he purchased all the Alien Autopsy rights, he would get all 3 films. He was told there were 3 films.
That was
An
okay.
Alien Autopsy film, which is the one we all saw, the tent footage, and the debris
I
footage.
feel like
The
you're making me
first-
crazy because you're saying things that aren't what you just said
Correct.
with a straight face,
Mm-hmm.
but you're not acting like it's different.
Yeah. It's weird, right?
I don't like it. I don't
Sorry.
like it at all.
KLF is gonna rock you.
Yeah.
All right, so May 5th happens. They're at this place called the Museum of London. They do this big screening. It was an invite only type of thing. The audience was filled with handpicked people, including members of the press and the media, assorted ufologists, religious people from all over the world. All these people came from all over the world, but they were handpicked, so it wasn't public. You couldn't just go there.
Right. They were invited to this event in London.
So per Philip, you could hear a pin drop in the theater after the thing.
It's because there was no audio. I got all the answers.
In attendance are Mantle and Kvyat, just to remind you, along with a bunch of other people.
Potential buyers, or is Kvyat already on the hook at this point?
Yeah, I mean, yes.
Okay.
They're all potential buyers. So after the screening, Kvyat...
You said religious people.
Yeah.
Potentially to purchase it.
I'm not sure about that, to be perfectly honest.
I'm not sure about anything.
I'm just telling you that's what this is what...
I'm just trying to stick anything together right now.
Now is a moment where I'd like to point out that there's a thing called...
Is this a nexus?
Unreliable narrators.
Okay.
And unreliable narrators in fiction and in writing and in film and all this stuff are characters and narrators who, for whatever reason, are either lying, like as in... what's that movie with Kevin Spacey where he's Kaiser Soze? What's that movie? He's, spoiler
Usual
alert.
Suspects.
Yes, spoiler alert. He's lying the whole time, so he's an unreliable narrator.
There's no such thing as spoilers.
Then you've got things like Fight Club, where the person doesn't realize that they're crazy.
So it's like either intentional in the Fight Club case, it's unintentional.
Yeah, it may or may not.
It's inevitable because of. Well, before
this
you
is more of a Kaiser
spoil
Soze thing.
Before you spoil all of '90s film and television, we'll just stop at those two because I think you might have covered.
Yes. Well, I mean,
the pertinent ones.
You got The Sixth Sense. What?
Nothing. And then there's Gladiator. Remember that twist in Gladiator at the end? If you didn't sit through it,
I didn't see it.
Oh, that's true.
Okay, so
a better one. I was trying to make up a twist.
Okay, so I already said that. So after the screening, Kvyat went back to their offices with them. I guess he was their most lucrative.
Oh, so they're going to wine and dine him. They're going to show him the town.
Boy, it's like it's like you can tell. They took him back to their offices, and he was told about this plan that they had, and this was the way that they were insisting that this roll out. So
I know you bought a film, but now let me tell you our plan.
For world domination.
Get on a plane and leave.
They insisted that anyone who bought the film from whatever country would be allowed to buy the film and do what they make their own documentary or show about it, but they were not allowed to release it except like the very first date they could release it was this date in August, and that was because they wanted to ensure that none of the press got images from it and leaked it early.
Oh, so they were selling it to different regions,
different countries,
all over the world. And everybody had to sort of had a gag order on it until a specific date.
And everyone signed contracts stating
that somebody in Connecticut couldn't send something to Paris and spoil it in Paris.
Correct.
Got it.
So that everyone would get their money's worth, basically. So it was a worldwide agreement, like with whoever bought the stuff.
This is all hat, no cattle. I almost said all cat, no cattle.
So Kvyat was not pleased with that because he wanted to be able to have more time to research what he was given.
See, now that's another side effect of this is by creating that artificial timeline.
Short window to research it and confirm that it's real.
But then you've already negotiated that timeline with all these other people. So if any one person wants to go against it, there's the weight.
And there's other people there bidding on it. So it's like whoever's going to be the highest bidder. So they artificially set up this thing where it's like, if you don't say yes, I got other buyers that are interested. So they're going to, scoop you basically. It's brilliant, really. He wasn't pleased, but he agreed to it. And that would give him very little time to authenticate it and make a documentary before the date in August.
Shoot.
So
that's kind of unfortunate.
after this, to your point, they went to a pub and Kvyat spoke with this guy named Volker Spielberg. Now,
Oh,
Spielberg made it clear that he was the senior partner, but that he liked being in the background. He doesn't like to be in the public eye at all. He's very private.
mhm.
He's very wealthy. He's a financier. His name has been associated with this film since like 93 in some of the things that you hear, and you hear just the name Spielberg, and people were assuming that Steven Spielberg was associated with this film.
That's very clever.
And that actually gave it a lot more clout than it truly had. But this is a German guy who has nothing to do with Steven Spielberg at all. But they would just say Spielberg is, really wants to buy a copy of this film, and he wants to do a movie about aliens, which is true, but it wasn't that Spielberg. It's a different Spielberg.
There's like a lot of games going on here, but in this kind of maybe answers one of the questions I was sitting on, which is you just sort of went straight to he found the money. And so I was going to ask you, did you follow that?
I was coming back to that.
And I feel like Spielberg may be part of an answer. I'll hold on.
No, it is. Spielberg is the one who put the money forward for it.
Okay.
And if you watch there, and we'll be getting to this, but there is a movie in 2006 that's sort of a comedy version of all of these events, and they don't call him Volker Spielberg, but there's a character in there who's supposed to somewhat loosely.
What do they call him? Like Horst Lucas?
I don't remember what his name is, but I have it in one of my other notes. I have many pages of notes.
Wait, this isn't your only notes?
Mm-mm.
This is just one.
I have like 20 pages on another.
Are you going to offer to sell these to people in different regions of the world now, and you're going to make sure they all get released on the same date?
I have no idea how much crap I had to read for this. Okay. So after this, they went to this pub. He's talking to this guy. So around this time, Santilli also showed Mantle, Philip, a film roll with the edge code. So he's still talking to Philip, right? And he shows him the 16 millimeter.
So now we're getting into the technical things I was talking about.
Yeah. So
the triangle,
yep,
little edge code.
That's right. So this is where he sees the edge codes on just the very first frame of a roll of 16 millimeter film. And now a roll of 16 millimeter film carries about 3.5 minutes of footage, right? Like it's not a long time.
Very
and there's no
short.
sound.
And if you don't know, the way that at least Eastman Kodak worked is that they would use these little geometric symbols, and they would be associated with like different decades of film runs. But you could always sort of tell, like I think the 1945 one was the one with maybe 46, 47 was the year that had this particular code, and so did like an earlier set of
27, 47, and 67.
Yeah, so that would be one of the first things that someone trying to authenticate some 60 millimeter film would look for, to try to at least ascertain if the film stock was created around the time that the film was supposed to have been made.
And so Philip saw that and could confirm that those were correct. However, he was not allowed to unroll the film and like hold it up and see what was on the film.
So he could have just been shown
any roll of film from 1947 or 67 or 27.
Mm-hmm.
Just visually, there's no way to tell. Now, Kodak would definitely be able to do analysis on like one frame of the film and be able to tell exactly when it was made because of what's chemically inside the film. But they have never been given any of the film, regardless of multiple people, including Philip, like trying to get them copies of the film.
Well, and if you watch the documentary, Alien Autopsy Fact or Fiction,
which I will eventually get to,
from at least the Eastman film house who talks on that.
Yes.
And I know that the people who were on this show have issues with how they were presented on this show.
Well, that's because they were told some somewhat misleading things. So
I'm doing the thing. I'm going to back off.
All right. So during this time, Santilli was pressured to release a statement from the cameraman, which he did, and it was criticized at that time for using a lot of English slang as opposed to American slang. Now, if you really are curious what that is, the entire thing is online where you can read it. But Santilli later admitted that he had written the statement himself from his memory of what the cameraman said, so it wasn't actually written personally by the cameraman. It was sort of a...
But it sounds like it was full of colorful language that would have not been spoken by some guy who was in Cleveland and lived in Clearwater, Florida, and was in the military.
No, he referred to like certain military ranks,
like lieutenant. Or
like, no, more like the name of a rank that was in the British service that's not in the American service. It doesn't even exist.
okay.
Just using terminology and words for things that we don't use. Like they,
So
you know,
it
so
had
sort of like saying
intrinsic
pub. Like if
fallacy.
you talk about a pub, it's sort of weird here. It's just, it's not that we don't know what the
I
word
mean, it
means. It's just
was.
not something
Around
that,
Atlanta, there's plenty of pubs. People call it that.
just saying. We tend to say bar. There's just a number of those types of things in the thing. So
Okay.
during this time, also, Ray distributed a drawing of some hieroglyphic like symbols, which were criticized for being very similar to Greek letters. And it's not just the drawing, but like this is what is in the, I'm going to go ahead and show you now. This is some of, from the debris footage. This is
Mm-hmm.
what it looks like. And it is, you can see, it kind of looks like,
That's the I-beam, right? That the
this is
guy
the
was
I-beam,
talking
yeah.
about that he had in his kitchen and he
Right.
could pick up and look at.
And now this is just kind of looks like letters, like Greek letters. It's weird.
At this angle, it looks like it says Willow.
It kind of looks like it says video.
That would be hilarious.
Anyway.
It was a news helicopter from
So
space.
Santilli's distribution plan, again, was to get all TV networks who secured those exclusive rights to show all their stuff on August 28th, 1995, which they all had to agree to. And so Fox agreed, but insisted that Kvyat get Kodak to verify that the film was possibly that old.
Okay.
So what he did was, again, he was given like the very first leader frame, which has nothing on it.
That was just exposed.
And so they said,
looking.
yeah, if it looks like this, then it was either from one of these 3 years. So that's the only authentication that occurred prior to the documentary going out. Later in 95, in May of 95, so this is after these people have seen it, Kvyat returns to Fox and sets up meetings with them. And then Gary goes over as a rep to sort of meet with Fox. Ray didn't go, but Gary did. And
wow, he's really pulled Gary in.
They showed 2 of the cassettes.
Okay.
And
so you mean like 2 of the 3
they
videos?
showed the alien autopsy footage that we all saw.
And the tent.
Footage.
Okay.
So Kvyat believed that the tent footage could be salvaged. And he intended to ask a friend at NASA for help, which I'm sure Gary is like hearing this in the meeting going, having a minor stroke. Early in June of 95, Fox strikes a deal for the footage for all 3 tapes, which is they were told they would get, which was one of the alien autopsy, which they didn't know there was a 4th tape, but the alien autopsy footage, the debris footage, and the tent footage.
I'm guessing if the 4th tape had actually existed, it would have been very quickly disappeared. Like once rumor
the debris film they bought sight unseen because they were never shown it. So
right.
They're
but
just
I meant the mystical 4th tape that supposedly had Truman and the crane.
Oh,
and
well,
other things.
no, that's the debris footage. It's just that Ray says that these things are on there, but they're not, according to people who have seen the debris.
See what I mean? This is what I'm talking about, where it feels like you said one thing, and then it seems like you say the same thing, but a little bit different. Almost like you want me to be crazy after hearing all of these
I've been saying the same thing the whole time, Aaron. What's wrong with you?
I don't know. I'm just going to keep drinking more of this delicious water and continue to glare at you angrily.
It's got LSD in it.
Sweet. Don't do drugs, kid.
All right. So, anyway, Fox paid about supposedly $200,000 for the footage.
Ding ding, like he's more than made his money back.
It's believed that he also was paid £1,000 in England, and each country is buying it for who knows how much money, right? He's selling it.
England bought it for £1,000, but Fox allegedly spent nearly $200,000 for this.
Yeah.
I've known this guy at pubs. You know, he was really good at darts, but he had all these other stories he liked to tell.
I don't know. Look,
okay, all right.
These numbers are all fairly speculative because
there's no
accounting of it. So I kind of take all that with a grain of salt. But the point is that we have no idea how much money he made, but it was a lot.
Okay.
When you factor in how many countries he sold this stuff to, right?
Yeah. I don't know how many of them there are, and it'll probably be different next time you tell me.
Well, I don't know either, but I know that it was like Russia and several countries in South America.
Ooh, I want to watch the Russian version of this special. I bet it's amazing.
June 2nd, 1995, Santilli had previously, unknown when, reached out to a Dr. Christopher Milroy, who is a teacher of forensic medicine at the University of Sheffield.
Okay.
This June 2nd was the date of the report.
Is he the one that was in?
Nope.
Okay.
I don't believe so. He wrote a report about the autopsy procedures that were done, and he stated that it looked to have been done not by a pathologist, but by a surgeon, which I think someone in the thing says. So I don't recall. It could be him, but I don't think anybody was British in that movie.
There was one person that was brought in. I'm sorry I didn't jot his name down, but
fine.
He
too many names.
There are a ton of names, but he is in the Alien Autopsy Fact or Fiction, and he was a British guy who was brought in by the British police for a lot of pathological and forensic sort of things. Like he was a witness in cases who would analyze medical information, and he was the one commenting. Him and the other person, I think, both kind of made the comment that it looked like a surgeon, somebody who maybe had done several of these, but that wasn't their main job.
June 22nd, 1995, Philip receives a call from a man claiming to be the cameraman, the mysterious cameraman.
So he got a phone.
He was like, I don't really want to be in the public eye, and I'm really old, and so I can't guarantee. He's like, I'm not going to rule out meeting with you, but I probably am not going to be alive a lot longer. So, it was a really weird call.
Sounds like a very strange conversation. It only lasted
a few minutes, and not a lot came out of it because Philip was trying to just establish a rapport with him so that he would continue to talk to him. But that didn't work because he never heard from him again. June 25th.
I'm not sure you heard from him the first time.
Mantle interviews Santilli, and he documents how Ray came to have the footage and what he planned to do with it, and it was all printed in several places at that time. So that interview is one of the many interviews that's listed in the book that I read, and is also a big reference for what I'm saying here as one of the stories. August 19th through 20th, Santilli did a presentation at that UFO conference that we talked about earlier. And that was the first ever public screening of the Alien Autopsy film. So again, the Fox special hasn't happened yet because it's like a week
So they're
before.
kind of breaking their own, requirement not to show it.
Yeah, they don't have to follow the rules.
Well, it's not like there's cell phones, right? So they could theoretically have shown this in a
cameras
room.
were allowed, nothing like that. They did search.
So this would just generate buzz, honestly.
Correct.
Like it's really good salesmanship in a way.
A lot of people were shocked. Again, the room, you could hear a pin drop. Philip said people in the front row were like crying and sobbing at seeing this because they thought that they had vindication and believed, oh my God, there really are aliens. So August 28th, 1995, we're finally there.
You said that 3 times. Like we've gotten to 1995 at least once before this.
Autopsy, Fact or Fiction, aired on Fox. And this included only one of the alien autopsy footage things.
I feel like there may have been some debris stuff in there though, because they talk a bit about the I-beam and other things in it.
Yeah. Well,
I'm jumping ahead again, aren't I?
I don't know.
Okay.
I mean, I'm gonna get to something about that though. Channel 4 broadcast. Channel 4 is in Britain, so they broadcast a Roswell documentary made by Union Pictures in London at the same time. So this is what we saw. Just a still shot from the alien autopsy video. If you've never seen it, this is pretty much what it looks like. It lasts for
permutations of this, just from different angles, in and out of focus.
Yeah.
But what you see here is basically what you're going to
get.
It's going to get grosser. Like they warn you in the documentary, this is graphic. Like they really play that aspect of it up, and they clearly, if it is fake, went out of their way to make it look like you want to look away from it. Especially if you're 90s sensibilities, maybe you haven't seen Saw yet. This would be pretty shocking to see on TV, especially on Fox.
It's not in color, so it's not as gory, but yeah, you're right. So this is something that I found
murder
confusing.
In black and white is still murder.
This goes to your point a second ago. So in the book that Philip wrote, he states that there were 3 broadcasts on Fox of this film, and that each special that they did was slightly different, and that Fox intended to show little snippets in each one of all 3 tapes, so that each one would have a little bit more footage in it to keep people wanting to watch, because this show got huge ratings for Fox. I mean, holy crap, it was like, and then they sold it.
Sweet Jonathan Frakes narration.
Oh my God, Jonathan Frakes.
I know.
I went to you and Tim and I was like, do you guys know if Jonathan Frakes is like actually into aliens? Because he directed or produced or something, that show called Roswell.
Yes, well, the next generation of Roswell. So it wasn't
No, he was involved in the original one.
Well, the stuff I read was about the later work he did with that, where he was sort of rebooting it with the Roswell not being teenagers but being older. So
Ew.
Yeah, I know, but I
Oh
mean,
my
it was what he
God.
wanted to do.
I like that show, Roswell.
I
It's
never
one of my
watched
guilty
it. I never
pleasures.
did. I just remember the image. Wasn't there that older gentleman was sort of the
Oh
post?
yeah, the
Yeah,
guy that was in Die Hard 2 that was doing the naked tai chi.
yeah, sure.
He's the sheriff on that show.
Yeah, he was a very broody kind of carved out of leather kind of fellow, wasn't he?
Slightly sexy in a yeah.
Yeah, I didn't really get that. But I'll take your word for it. Like sexy, like Jonathan Frakes,
I'm bringing
or
sexy back.
that's what
What?
that's what I've heard.
All right. So on November 25th, they plan to air the third program, this time showing the tent and debris film, but the cameraman suddenly couldn't remember the tent footage being related to the alien autopsy film. So Fox still didn't have the tent footage, and when they finally got
That
it, it
doesn't
was
speak well to the quality of the tent footage. If you could call an audible on it and go, no, that was just an injured football player. You know, that doesn't really
he's like, wait a minute, I don't know what that even is. And so it was anyway, it's unusable and it was bad quality. The copy that they ended up getting was so bad that they couldn't use it.
Well, I
It
didn't know
wasn't
he
like the
had
one they
multiple
saw.
copies of his
Well,
16
he would show
millimeter
people stuff
footage.
on a VHS tape, but then he was like, I can't give you this copy. I'll mail you one. I'll mail you your own copy.
Okay,
But
so like Santilli, he would do the thing where he's like, here's the cans, but here's a VHS version
you're
of
not
what's.
Gary?
I'm talking about the cameraman.
You're assuming there is a cameraman.
Well, sure. Yeah, but I do that off and on. Like I don't always, but for this purpose of this statement.
I mean, we haven't gotten there yet, but I mean, I'll just tell you, believe no one, trust no one. The X-Files were very heavy during this time, and while they had several mottos, one of which was "I want to believe," another one was "Trust no one." So
Another one was that their truth is out there,
truth is out there. So
and
it's
that's
not
a
in
that's a
here.
double meaning. It means it's out
It's
there to
out
find.
there.
Yeah, and it's just in case you missed Fox Mulder.
All right. So my problem with all of that multiple specials thing is that I can find no evidence
Mm-mm.
that that is accurate. I see that they rebroadcast it,
Mm-hmm.
but I think it was just a rebroadcast of the original. I
And when you
can't verify
watch,
that one way or the other, though. I'm not saying that Philip is wrong. I'm just saying I can't find anything on the interwebs that tells me that. So I found like a TV schedule that just said rebroadcast.
oh, you're talking about UFOs and trusting the internet at the same
I
time.
mean,
Mm.
so
When I
October.
do, I will say when I watched the special, the alien autopsy is a fact or fiction. Um, it felt like it all went together as one thing. It didn't feel like it was three things that were mashed together.
No.
It seemed well constructed as a unit.
Yeah. Well, again, I looked high and low and I could not find any
I'm
like
not convinced that Jonathan Frakes is real at this point, or else I would say let's ask him because you'd think he would have
I
had to
don't think the
narrate.
world outside my house exists anymore.
Well, that's it. I had to drive through it to get here. I can
I
vouch.
think you're a figment of my imagination.
Fair enough.
Fight Club. So
Don't spoil that movie again.
all right.
Again,
October 23rd, 1995. So we're like a month out or 2 months out from the Fox broadcast. There's a French TV production called TF1. And I wrote down somewhere what that stands for, but I can't find it. It's on my other notes. But you can't find a copy in English. So unless you speak French, good luck. I tried to find it to watch it because it sounds awesome, frankly.
I really want to find that Russian broadcast. I'm going to
know,
start
right?
looking
I
for
really
that now
want
that you
to.
mentioned that.
So, this TV production in France discovers that Ray Santilli met with a guy way back in 1992.
So they had their own private investigator.
Yes. Well,
like
let me just say, when this thing came out on August 28th, everybody all over the world is abuzz, and all the UFO groups are like all over it. Like everybody's in the 90s, there's no internet, like there is an internet, but it's not what it is today.
but it's
and
owned by the Air Force.
people are like trying very hard to figure out and do their own research. Everyone's doing the thing like you're talking about, like, was this phone available? Was this clock available? Is that microphone something that existed then? They're all double checking whether they're UFO people or skeptics or news people or whatever. And so, as part of that, this French TV production, these badass French people they find out that time when he went to Cleveland,
Okay.
Ray, that he actually met with this guy named Bill Randall. This is Bill Randall. He's a well-known DJ broadcaster-y type of guy in that area.
Nice microphone.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
And he was known to have actually gotten a lot of some of the earliest footage of Elvis. There are a lot of photos online of him with Elvis, a young Elvis.
This is the first thing you said all night that sounds truthy.
So
you could still be wrong. You could just be getting better at it.
So this is where he purchased the Elvis footage.
Okay.
Gary was present at this meeting, according to Bill Randall himself, because the French people interview Bill Randall. And according to him, when Santilli purchased the footage, he immediately turned to Gary. Like, he's like, can I buy it? The guy's like, yeah, okay, here. And then he turned to Gary and he's like, okay, I'm going to sell it to you. Right then and there. And so he sold it immediately to Gary, who worked for Polygram. And so Polygram then had the Elvis footage. And this footage was shot by a guy named Jack Barnett. So again, this is footage taken of Elvis in July of 1955. Both performances were filmed by this freelance photographer named Jack Barnett, who actually died in 1967 and was never in the U.S. military, although he was a cameraman on the Italian front in World War II. So,
like part of the press corps, or
it wasn't clear. I didn't look into it.
I don't know how you sort of just wind up on the front.
I assume it may not have been with the U.S. military. I don't know why he was there.
Sounds like an awesome story.
Whatever.
You're just like throwing awesome stories to the side, getting to
I gotta get through all of this.
I know, it's amazing.
So
it's like legends are born in the middle of
this. Ray has said that he's made up this name Jack Barnett.
But then there's a real.
But there is a real Jack Barnett who was a cameraman.
I don't trust anything, but it's getting weird.
Why? So there's a plan to confront Santilli on this TF1 is the name of it, television something one.
Probably Television France.
Jacques Pradel is the guy, the interview guy. It's a special by him about the true identity of Jack / the Bill Randall connection. But they think that unfortunately, because they wanted to
films about Elvis.
They wanted to surprise Ray on camera with this confrontation, Dr. Phil style.
That's crazy,
right? But they think he was probably tipped off. So he kind of knew in advance.
Who tipped him?
I don't know. Maybe Bill Randall himself.
Okay, right, because it's the Bill Randall connection. So he's probably.
So after being confronted with this on camera, Santilli changes his story right then and there and says that he met the cameraman after he purchased the rights to the Elvis footage. And
the cameraman was like, hey, got some alien footage.
And he just used that. Yeah. So it wasn't really related to the Elvis purchase. He was just saying that to help hide the identity of the cameraman because the cameraman really wanted his privacy. And he had this, because the story is, right? This is the story. The cameraman.
Oh, this is the story.
Well, this was the story about the cameraman, which I haven't really told, but supposedly he shot all these rolls of film. The government took a whole bunch of them, but
not
they left
the alien
him,
footage.
But not, well, no, some of it was alien footage.
Okay.
But there was just not, they didn't take it all. And
well,
the
like
last
you said,
rolls,
it's
they
only
were like, you go ahead and you develop that, and then we'll come and pick it up later.
Okay.
And then he took it back to Florida with him where he lived, and then they just never came. And he called them a whole bunch of times.
That sounds legit. That sounds like something that could
the military would do.
Yeah.
But so he just kept it in his garage or his whatever in the heat in Florida for 20, 30, 40 years, however long that is.
So did he develop, well, I mean, I guess we don't know, but he would have either developed it himself.
Yes, that's what he said.
Which means he would have seen at least the frames, even if he never strung it up and played it.
The problem is that it was stored in the heat in Florida. And so
no, I mean, at the time, like he would have known what he had just
Well, he shot it, so he knew what he had.
That's where this is all messing with my head because it's like
he knew what he had and he was trying to keep it secret, but it's been however many years now and he's almost about to die. And so he's like, I want to cash in on my thing because I'm old and whatever.
And I'm gonna spend it all on
I don't know
Studebakers,
bath salts.
Careful.
So
careful.
I mean, to take a bath.
Yeah, that's what that always means.
So
It
they
doesn't result in
then
zombies
this
ever.
awesome French program then played a clip of Volker Spielberg, and that's when Ray got really pissed. Like
Because
he was,
Volker was never supposed to be in
because
front of the camera.
no,
Or
Volker was literally on there cussing.
oh,
There's a great like they have a
where did they
clip.
get this? Did they just guerrilla film
Yeah,
Volker?
they
Okay.
called him up and recorded the phone conversation, and he's just like, "I have it here somewhere
And
on my."
France, the French guys are like, we don't care what the laws are. We're going to
They may
record and
have
play
bleeped him
this.
out. I don't
Well, no, I don't
know.
mean the vulgarity laws. I mean just recording people without their knowledge.
Oh, sure, yeah. It's the 90s.
Yeah, I mean we act.
He's like, and he says that he doesn't think that humanity deserves, because they were like, well, don't you think that humanity needs to see this film? Because the whole reason that Ray says he can't share the footage with anybody is that Volker, the financier, has the originals and he won't give them back.
Okay.
And so he can't make more copies and he can't give the footage to Kodak to process because this other guy who paid for the film has it in his vault and he won't give it back to Ray, and he's very grumpy and he doesn't want to be bothered and you can't talk to him, and so you just have to like accept that it's
Well, call
locked away.
Nicolas Cage. He'll go get
I'm
that
just
stuff.
right.
90s movie
There's
reference.
always an excuse is what I'm saying. So I have all these things that are problems with the film, with items in the film.
Okay.
So
So we're away from the timeline part briefly.
we're away from
and
the
we're going
timeline part
into
until
discrepancies
the
in the film.
2000s. But yeah, I'm gonna briefly, and then if I touch on something, jump in. So one thing I just noticed is I wouldn't be surprised in the 40s if they didn't wear masks or do anything like that for an autopsy, because they didn't used to do that, at least for human autopsies. Now, if it's an alien, who knows? It sky's
There
the
was an
limit.
excellent point in the Fact or Fiction documentary that pointed out that the wound on the alien's leg could have been related to radiation. So, because they were saying it bore resemblance to either someone who was being treated with radiation and it went wrong, or there was
Mhm.
some sort of radioactive exposure. And so, in the 40s, they would have known to wear suits that would have protected them from like alpha and beta particles,
But
like
the suits they're
isolate.
wearing are not the kind of suits that would protect you from that.
They would from certain kinds of alpha. They
I
wouldn't
mean,
protect you
according
from
to the people that I read about.
a piece of paper would protect you from certain kinds of radiation.
Yeah.
Like so there is
Well, it's alien radiation too, right?
okay, fair enough. But
It's
I mean, but like
magical.
particle radiation, like it would have needed to have been like foil, right, to stop I think beta. But at least from the purpose of keeping alpha particles from getting into the lungs and things like that, I'm stretching, but
You're reaching,
I'm
Carver.
just saying
You
there
want this to be real.
I
I want
mean,
to believe.
who doesn't want it to be
I
real?
don't. I think
I mean,
it's
I don't want
insane.
actually when you think about what it is, it's like I want it to
It's
be real, but
sad, is
not
what it is.
that to be real. I don't want that to be the real thing.
All right.
But
Well, I'm just going to quickly go through this because I
nope,
got.
I'm just gonna keep talking about alpha beta radio. I'm just kidding. I'm just joking.
Okay. Number one is the danger sign, which
Okay.
I initially wrote this segment as danger zone. Danger zone. The danger sign left in the observation window is, on the left side of the observation window, is thought to not be from the 40s. So, according to John English, who is the International Aerospace Hall of Fame director in San Diego, he searched OSHA archives and
That's a crazy title, by the way.
and the American National Standard Institute archives, and they confirmed that that danger sign was adopted in 1967
Okay.
by the National Standard Institute and approved by OSHA in 1973, and then likely implemented in 1983. So it was not the danger sign that would have been available for use by the military in 1940s. And if you know anything about the military, you know that they are insane with like their forms and the things that they use. So that's one thing. The body, there's a lot of problems with the body from medical uh, experts. I jotted down a couple. Number one, why is its structure so fundamentally human?
While being internally so not.
Well, right. So like, why would an alien look so human?
That
Number one,
that
and
is
then
actually what I bring to this whole thing is I don't think that if we were to encounter a true alien species, and if you were watching the live stream last weekend, I kind of went there.
yeah,
We take for granted that things are humanoid, and we like to portray our aliens as being like us. I don't think we'd even be able to know that they were aliens. Like, I think it
We're
would be
very
so,
human centric.
yeah, I think it would be so different if something, unless we were somehow like a hybrid version of them, if there was that sort of storyline going, and we're just a different branch of the same, seed of life, then I would not expect there to be something like, oh, and instead of, five fingers per hand, it's got six fingers per hand, I'm like, that is the epitome
I
of
wish
a
I had made
weird
a slide
flex.
of the thing that is like the palm prints, and it's got like six fingers, and it's so goofy looking. It looks like those fake Bigfoot footprints that they show that
Yeah,
has
like a
even
plaster.
consistency that's clearly stamped. Like when you step, there's parts of a footprint that go deeper into the mud than other parts and stuff like that. It's just so weird.
Well,
It's
and
like
it
this.
doesn't make sense to me that if that, okay, we're jumping to that debris footage, but if that were in fact a part of the control system of some craft, why would it just be a neat little block like it was cast? I mean, okay, Aaron, I know that there's probably other alien technology that would cause it wirelessly to talk to other things. No, I just don't.
I just
Why would
think
it be
that
so
like
cleanly broken off
because
like
of what
that?
I know is coming next, I'm not going to spend a lot of time on these things because there's a
And
very clear explanation
well,
for
that
why.
is one thing I did want to stop and say is it is ridiculous to me that it looked humanoid at all,
I
that it even
agree.
had eyes, that it
And the
had two
doctor said
eyes,
that too.
and
Yeah.
that when you take the black thing off the eyes actually have,
Yeah,
sclera
just like
and whites. And why on earth would it have earth
yeah.
developed? It's freaking me out.
It was cool that it had built-in sunglasses though, don't you think?
No, it didn't make any sense.
Why was the autopsy so short? Because with
They
an
bring that
alien
up.
autopsy, I mean, you'd spend
Well, that's what
weeks.
I feel like that's what one of the pathologists said, is that if you had an actual alien autopsy, I think it was even the British guy, and I'm talking fast because I don't want to spend a lot of time right here, but he said that if it was truly an alien autopsy, why would it only take 2 or 3 hours to complete? You would probably spend months, weeks, if not months, if not years,
Right.
properly just
Yeah.
doing this all the way down to the atom.
Yeah. And then why are the outward or the internal structures so amorphous?
I have an answer to that now,
Yeah.
because this is not the only one. These are two surgeons who have operated and done autopsies on so many aliens that this is just one more in a long line of dead aliens that they've had come through their doors, and they're just knocking this one out.
Cigarette smoking man's just got a whole army of.
Yeah, you're just saying that we've gotten to the point at this point in our interactions with aliens that we were just sort of glib about autopsies.
I see.
Yeah.
Well, so they pointed out that if it looks human outwardly, then it would seem to follow that some of the internal structures like bones and muscles would also need to exist to support that structure, and they were not there. So let's go forward into the special effects. So, special effects. So, when polled, special effect artists unanimously believed that the body was a special effects dummy. Trey Stokes, who worked on The Abyss, The Blob, Batman Returns, RoboCop 2, etc., and Cliff Wallace of Pinewood Studios have pointed out that the posture and weighting of the corpse on the table in the film is not consistent for a body in the supine position, the laying down position, and that
Mm-hmm.
it was therefore apparently made from a body cast that was taken while someone's standing up. So if you think about it, there's always fat and like loose skin and stuff. So if you lay down on a table, your skin and hair and everything sort of sags back and flattens out on
And
the
I know this
bottom,
is
and that
morbid. If you are deceased, you
all your blood
also,
also pools to your back.
that happens and you become less plastic. So
Yes.
if this truly had been something that had been dead for a length of time, the flat portions that made imprint on the back would have been rigid, I
Yeah.
would think. But it
Well,
it was an alien though,
well, I know,
so,
but if there's internal blood or fluids of any kind,
and
they
with
would
that
they would
injury, there's no
pool
way it
because we
wouldn't be.
still do have gravity here on Earth, as far as I know. Trey
That's
Stokes
what you think.
estimates that the entire autopsy production could have been accomplished for around $50,000. Stan Winston, who was featured in the Fox special,
Hmm.
was purportedly misled at the time of his interview, having been told that the footage was conclusively confirmed to have been dated to 1947. So what he says
Is
in his
related
interview
to
is
someone trying to do
assuming
that then.
correct.
Sorry,
And
I did the thing.
yeah, you did,
I got
but
right to it.
that makes
I
sense
like to
though.
appear smart sometimes.
In a later Time magazine article, he stated that he believed that the film was a hoax. The film seemed like video, not 16 millimeter,
It did have that feel to it.
and it didn't have any scratches and
That bothered me, especially given something you haven't said yet, so I won't say it.
everything that's weird, that's a gag, it's like clearly a weird thing is out of focus magically.
Or they just keep moving behind. They even talk about that in the special.
Which is not something they did in the 40s. They locked down shots and just had static shots,
That
especially
was my guy.
military photographers.
That camera would have been at distance, and it would have been locked down, and it would have been in focus ahead of time.
And they said typically,
and there would have been more than
because
one.
I'm about to get to like they interviewed a whole bunch of actual.
Well, what's funny is the ones they
cameramen.
interviewed for the special gave supporting statements. The out of focus was to be expected
I
because there
know.
wasn't focus through the camera lens.
Well, it's interesting how that happened, but so strange writing. So there's the security markings that there were these security markings that disappeared from one of the films. So there was like a little thing at the bottom,
Like a
that-
burned in sort of warning.
it was almost like a little card that said, do not distribute, for, something like that. But all the military people said that's not actual military lingo. That's not something that we would have said. And so then it just disappeared in later videotapes that got released. And Ray admitted that he had put them on there just because they looked like something that was on a card that was stuck on front of one of the canisters.
Yeah, okay.
Hieroglyphics on the supposed debris spell out two slightly disguised English words, as you saw earlier.
Yeah.
So in the book, Philip talks to several cameramen, real cameramen, Dan McGovern, Bill Gibson, and Joe Longo, who are known World War II cameramen, and showed them all the film box labels and the footage. And so they all were just kind of like, yeah, none of this is the way that we, you had to adhere to very strict procedures.
Kind of a shorthand.
Yes.
To make it easy to index.
And also they did this whole thing of mapping out. He said that he was in like Pittsburgh, the cameraman, Joe or John, whatever his name is. Jack, that's what it is. He's in like Pittsburgh or something, and that the crash happened in Roswell. And so he flew there that immediately. And at that time, that would have been a very long flight. And it's like he's getting there and seeing them taking the bodies out of the crash. That's the tent footage, is the footage that they shot inside of a tent at the site of the crash.
Where
right
there's
after it happened.
Still smoke and fire.
Before there's no way that they would have waited the amount of time to take
this is an example of one of the things that instantly, like the subconscious things that warn you when things aren't what they seem to be.
Yes.
We're talking about an Air Force base where the Enola Gay airplane had been stationed. This is an important base in the U.S. Air Force. It is a fully staffed base. It is a fully stocked base. Why are they flying a camera person from Pittsburgh?
A freelance one.
A freelance camera person. There would have been an Air Force or Army.
Well, that's another thing they said, is
that
they would have had a lot of other close
in
people who would
Guys,
have been there.
they're so close to the Nevada and other secret military bases out further in the Southwest that would have been my go-to for an alien crash, not some freelancer out of Pittsburgh. It would have been somebody who's already got security clearance and is vetted by the military. So that it's almost like when you watch a crime documentary or something, or a crime police show, and you see the police do something they would never do in real life. Like you just
like run massive DNA samples on some
cray or whatever. Yeah, like a cigarette found in the street corner or something. I don't know. But it just doesn't follow that you would do that. And it's like in that moment, it's like you get that subconscious cue that nothing else that you're about to see is really, it doesn't mean it isn't partially what they say it is, but it definitely means it's not what they're saying up front.
Yeah. So, all right. The mysterious collector, this Volker Spielberg, I finally found, okay, so he has this long thing, and I'm not going to read all of it, but the last thing that he said was, when asked by the French producer guy, if he didn't think this was something that should be shared with all of humanity, Spielberg's answer was, no, I don't think so. I have a totally different opinion. F the world. I mean, the world is full of egoism, and so am I. So
he was drinking at the time.
I don't know.
I mean, that's weird.
They do point out that this would be...
Did they only ever talk to him via phone? Did anyone ever see him face to face?
There's mention in this book that someone had footage of him at his office somewhere.
I'm starting to wonder if he's even real. Like if he's another construction of...
Several people say they've met him.
Okay.
That are not Ray. This hoax apparently, obviously, would take a whole lot of people's involvement.
Yeah.
What's weird is that some people say none of them have come forward, although a number of them actually have.
Well, and the convenient thing about the masks they were wearing in the autopsy is you can't identify any of the people who were in
And it's convenient, isn't it?
the film.
The Kodak question. So Santilli states that Kodak verified the film as being manufactured in those years. However, the film that was shown to Kodak and to everyone else contained no images that came directly from that alien autopsy 16 millimeter film. Santilli has later stated that Volker has all of the original 16 millimeter film. Examples of changing stories about the film. So Ray first claimed that he obtained 15 10-minute reels of film from the cameraman. Later, he changed his story to 22 3-minute reels. And then in January of 95, he mentioned that the footage was 1947 16 millimeter nitrate film, but Kodak has never produced 16 millimeter nitrate film. So just a lot of.
Well, it sounds like an evolving lie. Like, every time he finds, it's almost like a pachinko game. Every time he finds a person who knows enough about what he's talking about to correct him on a point, he immediately changes the story. And the next person he tells it to, the story has improved. Like he's going to get further each time he tries.
Also always has an answer if you catch him in a lie or catch him in a, thing that doesn't make sense.
Yeah.
So in 2006, there was a movie release called Alien Autopsy. Just to make it more confusing, there's another thing called Alien Autopsy. And it stars an English TV presenting duo called Ant and Dec. And if you're British, you know who they are. This is them. This is the movie. I watched this movie. It's actually quite fun and entertaining. I do recommend it, even if you don't watch anything else, although it does take a number of liberties with the story.
The story takes a number of liberties with the story.
So it's fine. So interestingly, it's executive produced by Ray and Gary.
Oh, how about that?
In fact, they make a little cameo post credits. So stick around after the credits.
This feels, and you said something about this getting very KLF, and I don't have the same respect for these creators that I do for those guys, but I do sense this sort of.
Well, this is where it's about to happen. So.
This whole it's supposed to not make sense. It's supposed to not make sense that it doesn't make sense. It's intentionally not making sense, and that's making sense. You know what I mean? Like it's one of those things that keeps eating its tail.
That's right. So the film has a completely different narrative than anything Ray had said up to that point. So in the movie, I won't go into the whole thing. Feel free to go watch it. It's on Amazon. He says he got the film, but it was so degraded that it was not usable. And so basically, he was on the line to this scary financier who had put the money forth, and he didn't know that the footage sucked and had degraded. Like in the time it took him to go gather the money and buy the film, the footage degraded from when he had originally seen it. So he's thinking he's buying
again, it
something.
doesn't make sense because you're talking about something that was allegedly filmed in 1947.
I know, but the cans were just opened, and so the exposure to the oxygen and all the stuff, whatever.
And the cameraman who doesn't know anything about this film would have not known how to take a $200,000 investment and preserve it until the money had been raised.
Yeah, well,
he would especially risk the quality of this film since he knew that $200,000.
So.
Oh my goodness, I'm not buying that.
So, he faked it. Although, in the movie
there's
they kind of go with the whole we faked it and it's funny and we're just gonna, we have a friend who's a butcher and we have a friend who is a wedding video guy and we have all these things, and so this lady owns like a thrift shop, so she's able to get old stuff, antiques, like the clock and the phone and all that stuff, and so
and the tray.
They used someone's girlfriend or sister's apartment in London area and they filmed it, which some of that is true and some of it is not, but it feels like an Operation Mindfraggle.
Yes,
it feels like
they're
now
intentionally
they're saying
muddying the water.
It still really was real footage, but it was so degraded that we basically recreated it. So,
but in other times they've said that they recreated it shot by shot.
Well,
like they
I'm
meticulously. I'm not sure when, so I've been holding on that one.
It's coming very shortly. Later in 2006, there's a show called Eamon Investigates the Alien Autopsy. So that's a great special. I highly recommend it. It's on YouTube. I've got the link in my show notes. So Santilli says he did not fake the alien autopsy footage. He restored it.
Yeah.
He makes a big point in this frustrating as hell documentary that he has this smirk on his face when he's saying it. He's like, "No, we restored it. It wasn't a hoax. We restored it." And the guy's like, "No, at best you recreated it."
Yeah, I mean, we're talking to people
He
right
says it's
now.
no different than the restorations to the Mona Lisa or the Sistine Chapel, of which in the Sistine Chapel, for example, only like 15 to 20% of the paint is original.
But they painted over it. Like it's still.
Yeah. What's the
So
difference,
here's
Aaron? It's the
here's
same thing.
no. Um, many of you who are
RoboCop.
many of you who are listening, the listener, have seen or heard about the special versions of the Star Wars that were meticulously and painstakingly restored using 16 millimeter or 20 what is it 35 millimeter film that they
35
actually
millimeter,
got.
yeah.
But they have several stages of this, and one of the cool things, if you do some research on them, and I'm not telling anybody to go out there and torrent any of this stuff because I don't know what's okay anymore when it comes to obtaining those videos, but the people who are doing it will sit down and they've done these short videos on how they restore the video. And if you sit down and watch what they do, um you don't get to what we saw in this alien autopsy video through a restoration process. Like it looks like what we see in that tape is contiguous. It doesn't jump. There's not clear indications of someone having airbrushed errors and grit out of the thing. There aren't like 40
No, they
copies of it.
didn't restore it,
That's
but he's
I'm
saying that
mad
they
and I want to
restored
make
it.
sure that no, they did not restore it.
No, he's using that word because he wants to, but he's smirking when he does it. And so you kind of want to punch him in the face. And I'm going to put his face back on the screen right now to remind you
we
how
are not
much.
advocating the punching
I'm
of
not
anyone in the
saying you
face.
should punch Ray in the face, but in
Look
this,
at that grin.
he's very pleased with himself for doing this.
Is that the
I'm
moment where
just
he's saying we restored it?
no, but I almost did get a screenshot of it because it's really frustrating. Uh, so around this time, and which is before and immediately after this film comes out in 2006, uh, a lot of other new information starts coming out. So it's sort of this resurgence, right? Of like 11 years after the fact, all of a sudden, now that this film's coming out, everybody's talking about it again, which is very fortuitous for Ray and his friend Gary because they're making more money. So all of these things were noted by Philip Mantle in a very recent interview with Andrew Eborn, which is also on the internet and is in my show notes that I'll post. Philip notes that a guy named Keith Bateman at AK Music says that they made the tent footage at a farm in England, and this was the first video that had been made. And he says that he had worked with Ray even before 1992 or sometime in the early 90s, like 1990, 91. And Ray said that it would be really cool if they had, like, wouldn't it be awesome if we had some alien footage and we could sell it? We'd make them millions of dollars, you know?
That right there is the Occam's razor for this whole story.
Yeah.
In my mind, it's just a couple of dudes and maybe ladies who said, hey, what if we had something way to convince people we had actual alien footage?
So they used they had this farm in England that they had access to. They used a butcher, much like in the movie, right?
Yeah.
They have a butcher in the movie. And they also show the butcher in Eamon Investigates. They found the butcher that was actually used. And the farmer of the farm and there were a bunch of other people in the video, and they filmed in color, and then they ran it through a computer and changed it to black and white and added the scratches. So this is the tent footage.
What scratches?
Well, there were scratches on
in
the
tent
footage.
Okay, I'm like, wait a minute.
They showed it.
It was buttery. It looked like digital video. Remember,
it's like butter.
Did you ever get one of those? Did you ever get one of those digital video recorders?
Yeah,
you know what I'm talking about? And
I
it just always had that perfectly 4:3 aspect ratio. You know what I'm talking about? And then you get the really nice smooth video. You know.
So they
29.97 frames per second.
Keith Bateman shows this video to Ray, and Ray says it's rubbish. Go get me something brighter and better. He wanted it bright.
Oh, so that was take one.
That was take one. So then they went to a studio to get a quote on what it would take to have an alien autopsy. And it was priced around 30 to 40,000 pounds. Ray said, hell no, I'm not spending that much money. So that's when he reached out to Mantle the first time about, hey, you know, I want to do a documentary, whatever. He's trying to get feelers out there because he doesn't know crap about UFOs. He just wants to kind of get a gauge on how gullible are these people. I feel like he's seeing the UFO community as very gullible, which
and then he probably approached the worst possible one or the best, depending on how you look at it, right?
So this footage has all been discredited by Santilli, remember, because he said that the cameraman couldn't remember that it was actually tied to the AA.
So he burned it. He's burned the tent footage.
Well, he's basically just said it's not really part of this. There's a guy named Simon who sends Philip Mansell an email, and Simon had seen in a UFO magazine this article that was written by Philip, and so Simon says that he has a good friend that made dummies that were used in the alien autopsy thing 11 years before. And so Philip, met with the Simon guy in this cafe in Manchester, and the guy wanted to talk to someone in television, the real guy.
Mm-hmm.
And so I guess he was ready to sell his story, so to speak, because now it's popular again. It's 2006. I want to make some money.
So a story discrediting it would have earned him.
So Philip gave him Kvyat's name, Kvyat being the guy that worked with Fox that got bought the show, right? So Simon
and then summoned Frakes out of whatever dimension.
Jonathan Frakes was like, "What ho?"
Leg up on the chair. Red alert.
Yes. Simon would not give his friend's name, but he did mention that he had worked on Max Headroom, so that would be John Humphreys.
Yeah.
This person, John Humphreys, is a sculptor. He's Royal Academy trained. He knows his stuff, but he's not a special effects guy. He's a sculptor. So then the talks broke down between Kvyat and John Humphreys, but before that had happened, John Humphreys mentioned that this guy named Spiros is the one you need to talk to. So Spiros Malaris, I'm going to go ahead and show this slide. So on the left here, we have John Humphreys, and on the right, we have Spiros. He gets connected via phone with Philip through a UFO magazine publisher. Again, those great publishers are super helpful in hooking you up with people. And so Spiros, if you can watch interviews with Spiros, he's very chatty. He himself isn't the most reliable narrator. He talks a big game, but he does seem like he is a special effects guy. I believe he worked on some Doctor Who stuff. He's worked on a lot of different things over the years. Philip went to his house, and Philip showed him his diaries, a bunch of storyboards, photos of the set where they did all this stuff. So Philip seems 100% convinced that Spiros did this. There are a lot of people online who don't think that Spiros really had anything to do with it, and he just wants to make himself sound cool.
Are you telling me that he created like a fake set of proof photographs from a fake?
What I'm saying is that Spiros got...
The inception is starting to make me insane.
Spiros never saw the film.
Ever, huh?
No.
Okay.
He was never shown this film that he was restoring.
But he had
not recreating
photos from the set.
No, he had photos of him on the set of Alien Autopsy making the alien.
Yes.
To prove that he... But he hadn't seen the original 16 millimeters.
Okay, gotcha. Do
you see what I'm saying?
I do. I see that we're at a different level of inception than I expected to be, but I'm there with you now.
They were going to come in. They were going to have an actor who looked like President Truman come in.
Oh.
But they couldn't find anyone to do that. They also at one point had access to period military vehicles. So that stuff that was being said by our friend Ray about
my guess is that they made it
Truman
and it got discredited.
And all this stuff. He thought they were going to be able to have that made, but then they couldn't pull it off. And so he just sort of pretended that part never happened. That's why that happened. So Spiros made the films in his girlfriend's flat in Camden. And if you watch the Amen Investigates show, you see like Ray and Gary are both interviewed heavily by this British sort of, investigatory guy. And he drives them. He's like, okay, well, show me the flat where you filmed it. Because they say, yeah, we filmed it in this flat. And they drive him to the place, and they say, we think it was this one. We can't remember exactly, but we think it was this one. And so they drive, and they're all sitting in a van, and they're like, yeah, that's it.
Just a panel van on the streets.
So anyway, Spiros says it was his girlfriend's flat, and that the last day of the shoot that they had a burglar break in, and the only thing that they stole was some sort of weird ray gun that they had laying around. I'm like, you were really going to put a ray gun in this movie?
Oh,
my
that
God.
would have been so great.
They made the first Autopsy film.
Can you imagine being the burglar who breaks in?
They talked about
like,
that.
There's like a
like
dissected alien laying
and
on
you're
the
like,
table.
holy crap, what did I break into? Can you imagine? That's the movie I want to see.
Yeah, but then they're like, I'm gonna take this ray gun.
I don't know if I got ammo for this, but it looks cool.
Maybe I could charge it. I don't know.
So the reason, remember when I told you there were 4 films and there were 2 Autopsy films?
Oh, so I didn't imagine that.
You didn't?
Okay.
The reason why there are 2 is the first one that had the gynecological exam on the body.
It sounds problematic.
The girlfriend whose flat they filmed it at was sort of doing research while they were doing the filming. And after they completed filming that day, she was like, they don't do gynecological exams when they're doing autopsy, so that's wrong, so you're going to have to reshoot the whole thing. So they filmed it again, but they had already cut open the leg.
Okay.
So the reason the alien's leg is cut open in the movie that we've all seen is because they had already done the first autopsy and they'd spent all of their money already, so they had to use the same prop they already had.
But the torso of the prop was intact, so were they able to restore that part of it? Like you said, they'd already filmed an autopsy.
Well, they filmed kind of an exam. I don't know if it was a full autopsy, but
Oh,
they
so
did
then
have
they
to
just-
replace the brain. They show that in the
Okay.
spoofy 2006 movie. So they
So
used,
that leg injury, well, that they were speculating
they burned the area around it and said, "Oh, it must be a radiation burn."
but they had actually just cut it
to
open.
cover up.
Yeah.
Correct. Yep.
Cool. Cool.
Does this answer any of the questions you were having, or are we getting to the part that you were wanting to get to yet? No?
None of my questions make any sense anymore.
I know.
Like I'm asking all the wrong ones.
So the reason why I said there's no point in lingering on whether the clock was valid is because it's all been reshot. So talking about anything that's actually in that film is pointless.
Well, I'm saying that
he's admitted that he filmed it in the 90s.
It starts sooner. It starts when they hired a person to come film it from Pittsburgh when they were just right next to like 7 top secret military
I agree
bases.
that's also a bit, that's
Like,
the bigger problem.
The problems start way early on.
Yeah.
And then just keep, and this is the KLF magic of it, is they keep bringing people to these new levels of inception on it.
Yeah.
And now suddenly people are going, this feels like something that was shot in color and then made black and white. And I'm like, that's the part that you think is crazy?
Well, I know, and everyone talking about like, well, I don't know about the way they did the autopsy, this, that, and the other. I'm like, he has already admitted that he filmed all of this. So anything you're seeing in the film is pointless.
That's why he was smirking.
All of that. I know. So Spiros said they never intended to sell it to it, from what he was told, that they were never selling it to a TV company, that they were going to let it go out and sell it themselves. And then 6 to 9 months later, they were going to tell everyone that it was a hoax and use it to sort of show how great their special effects abilities were to get work.
Well, which is funny because the special effects person they have on the documentary says, hey, if that person said I made that as a dummy, they'd be working here today. So I mean, as a calling card, it is a good.
Well, you have to remember too that Fox is like looking at them going, we really, we spent all this money on this amazing footage, so there's probably some amount of pressure on him to sort of not be completely like give me a break. Yes. I was shocked by the doctor saying, well, I'm not sure, I can't say 100% what this is. I'm like,
yeah, that was.
I can.
Yeah.
Are you sure? Would you like a second?
Yeah. Are you still certified, or have you let that go?
All right. So, Santilli, after the whole Ant and Dec film comes out, changes his story to the restoration story.
Mm-hmm. And
then he admits in the Eamon Investigates that the debris film was artistic license, because he says he made all of that. He made all the molds. He literally pulls the molds and things out of the trunk of his car and shows how he made all of those to the best of his recollection. So they also had released this video of the cameraman, I'm almost done, which was later admitted to be a fake. So there was all this pressure. I couldn't find out exactly when this happened, but it was sometime, I believe, around 2006. It might have even been in the 90s. But there's all this pressure. Who's the cameraman? Who's the cameraman?
It would have to have been while the cameraman was feasibly still alive.
Yeah, so maybe it was in the 90s. It looks 90s, and I'm going to show you. From what I heard, it was
like just a person that he met.
It's a homeless man.
Yes.
So here's a picture of the film that they released with the homeless man. And it's a still from the video itself, which you can watch on YouTube. It's very, as you can see, very blurry, very
Hmm.
video-ish, which is fine because it was known to be filmed in the 90s. And
That's very classic when they try to obscure a witness
yeah,
sort of
so Santilli
technique.
says this was done to give the real cameraman his anonymity, and it's the guy, and he's reading a prepared statement. So they basically got a homeless guy, they brought him in, they cleaned him up, they shaved him. Apparently the guy used to be an actor and he had fallen up down on his luck and he was living on the streets in LA. It's very sad.
Yeah.
And we're awesome for doing
Look
this
how
great
good
thing
we
for
are.
this guy. Look how great we are. um but anyway, my main source again for all of these wonderful things was Roswell Alien Autopsy: The Truth Behind the Film That Shocked the World by Philip Mantle. Initially released in 2012, I believe there's been a re-release since then with new information in it. There's
Hmm.
also a great interview with Philip that will be in my show notes where he talks. It was just released, like I believe, in December of 2020. Uh, it's pretty cool. So he talks about all the things. But yeah, it's really hard to follow the narrative because the narrative is ever shifting. It's like,
Well, like a good musician, I mean magician, like a good magician,
oh, speaking of which, Spiros is a magician, by the way.
it makes sense. This did enable, I think, for a lot of people, that sort of, Fox Mulder brief minute, and maybe some still to this day who think this could be authentic and all of this is just, smoke to try to throw people off the scent. But for a brief minute, you could ask, what if, like you were joking
You mean
around
in the
with
90s?
in the 90s.
Okay.
Well, yeah, clearly now it doesn't make any sense, especially for it to have happened in the 90s and just sat there like a poop on the floor since then. And there's like no follow up of any more revelations. But I can see how in the 90s people could get genuinely excited and genuinely imagine, what if this was really something like that had happened. Everybody had heard about Roswell. There'd been people like Bob Lazar who had come out and made statements about a strange base out in the middle of New Mexico.
Sure.
And or Nevada or wherever, I don't know. And so there was a lot of that buzz. So it was sort of like this, everybody got kind of swept up in it for a little bit. Now I'm not saying that makes this okay, but it was kind of fun to go back and revisit it.
Well,
I don't even
aliens
remember
were.
buying it when I saw it, any of this stuff as a kid, even the Roswell footage. I thought this is sort of dumb. And they may just be because I was raised by engineers who kind of like drilled into me to sort of ask questions and be a little more skeptical. Um, and I was more into like the space shuttle and the Apollo astronauts, like things that were you could see that had really happened, right? So,
Was the moon landing real,
yeah,
Aaron?
I caught that sort of weird moment in my head where I'm like, there's some folks out there who are going to be like, Aaron, it's happened.
You're a dupe,
You got
man.
swept up. You got we bought into it. But no, I was more fixated on the real life examples of us starting to explore space, and I felt like if we were to find out that aliens existed, we'd probably find out from that direction,
Yeah.
instead of some camera
Ray
guy from
Santilli?
instead of Ray Santilli and Spiros.
Mm.
So that's my take on it.
Were there things that you found in your research that I didn't cover, or questions? Because it seemed like you were like saying you still haven't gotten to it yet, and I don't know.
No, I was really wanting to make sure to spend just a moment because it bothered me from reading more about this that he started to claim that the individual film canisters had been restored. That
That's really bothering you a lot.
well, it was because the progression of that part of his story change was such that he was like, well, we restored a few frames, some frames that were damaged. It just happened to have been damaged, and
Oh,
we
well,
sort
he
of
does
fixed
say
it.
that there are some frames in the footage that are original.
Right. That makes that right there when you watch, if you go watch this footage, it makes literally no sense because the
What do you
rest of it
mean?
is so consistently clean video. Like, okay, fine. Which frames did you
Well, that's
leave?
why the Eamon investigates. He literally gets into a theater,
And he's like
shows the
cranking
film,
it
and he's
one
like,
frame
"Okay,
at a time.
show me the frames that are
Well, and he
original."
says,
And they're like, "Well, we
nobody
don't
knows
remember.
anymore.
We don't remember anymore." But I think that one right there was,
And it's literally like the frame between here and here. So that means they would have restored this part of the motion,
which is
used this frame,
amazing considering it's digital.
and then
It's not.
yeah, it's
There
like,
are no frames.
and yeah, that's a good point. And then restore, and then like made up this part. Like if this was the only frame that was real, it's just you look at this and you go, how is anyone even still asking if this is real? And I think the real question is, who is Jonathan Frakes? is he a real person? You know, because
Does he believe in aliens?
I don't even care about that anymore. I just want to know where because you asked the question. You mentioned that Dan Aykroyd himself is a ufologist, and he's
Yes.
very famously made very normal statements about it, and he's made some pretty wacky statements about it. And you asked, is Jonathan Frakes known to do that? So I started doing some advanced Google searching, Google foo,
Me
and,
too, yeah.
and I looked up, you know, Jonathan Frakes and all these different permutations, and just if you look his name up and you just subtract the word autopsy, you can only find things about Star Trek and the Roswell television show.
It's
And
because
if
I think he's just cashing in on his Star Trek association, which is tied to aliens, and he's like, well, they can get me to host all these cheesy alien things that were super trendy in the 90s because for whatever reason, I don't know if it was the upcoming millennium or,
all of the above, I mean, you
whatever.
had X Files and other things on
We also had
TV.
a lot of like space cult people, like the Heaven's Gate folks who were
Yeah.
like obsessed with aliens coming, and there was that whole comet that came around that time with
Well, and
Heaven's Gate.
Roswell
And
had been building up as a center for people. You know,
well, we
I
had
know you
also
haven't
gone
seen.
past like that post Watergate, like distrust in the government kind of thing had really come to a head. And so when you watch the X Files, Chris Carter never really commits one way or the other to being it's aliens or it's the government or it's a combination or it's neither one or it's he's constantly shifting sands much like Ray Santilli.
Hmm.
And so it's very difficult
But
when
he
you
is
watch that
openly
show.
making a science fiction show.
True, but it's very frustrating as a fan of that show to never really know where you stand even now all these years later.
What kind of bugs me is that he ever attempted to answer that question in the movies.
Oh my god.
Not what the podcast is about or this episode's about, but it struck me as really odd that he sort of relied on the mystery box and then tried to put something in the box. And
I'm reading a couple of comments that I see now on because
yeah,
I'm able to look at them now, and this guy Jess says, I can't I sorry, you may not be a man, you may be a woman, but they say, I can't believe I'm watching alien autopsy deniers.
fair.
um
So yeah, it's there's not a whole lot. The things that I was trying to be careful about is I was aware that some of the questions I had to ask sounded like things you were leading up to.
I may
So
have missed something because I had to cut some of the stuff out. The book was like the book alone was 550 pages, and then I've read like
no, I think you
two or three
actually found a
other.
really compelling story all the way through this, and it was very factual based, and it was very, you know, A to B to C. But the thing that kept messing with
Not
me is
really.
then C would go back to A, and then A would go to Q, and then Q
Well,
would go to
A would go
W.
to A prime.
Yeah, and it was like A1, A2, A3,
Correct.
and there were like multiple realities that were passing forward. So if there was anything artistic about this, it was the structure of the logic following it all the way through, all the way back from the first point where some of the very first assertions that were made about this were provably not real.
Yeah.
And so it was instantly suspect from
First
that
rule of
point.
Fight Club:
Yeah, as you don't
you don't
talk
talk
about
about
Fight Club.
aliens.
First rule of Fight Club is if you drink the last cup of coffee, you make another pot.
That's right. It's just good manners.
It is just good manners.
So,
That was cool.
did you learn anything new that you hadn't learned through your research?
I feel like there's
Or did you
megabytes.
unlearn
I feel
everything you learned?
no, I feel like there's megabytes of my brain that are now taken up with information that I'm probably just going to start throwing at people on elevators once COVID is over.
Cannot wait.
Like they're going to say, "Hey, how are you today?" I'm going to be like, "Can you believe that Ray Santilli actually claims that he flew?" And just like as floor 6, 7, 8 doors going to open at the top, and I'd be like,
press every button.
and then this guy Spiros, you know, and then the doors are going to open, and everyone's going to run out of the elevator.
That's right.
And that's going to be what I do when I first get back to the real world after COVID's over. Is I'm going to just ride elevators in tall buildings and just tell people about this
Preach the
show.
word.
Yeah, just make sure people know.
Yeah.
If there's one thing I can make a difference, folks, it's making sure everybody knows all of the details about the
Personally,
alien
I
autopsy.
am going to download all of this out of my brain, and I will listen to this.
What are you
going to
replace it with?
Well, whatever the next podcast is. But I honestly, I'll listen to this a year from now, and I'll be like, "Holy crap! I learned a lot about that, and immediately forgot it all."
That's what happens, especially when I go down that rabbit hole and I produce all those audio files that I listen to, and you know, I will pull a lot of data into my head and then just let it drain out the other side at the end of the show.
Well, what I'd like to give myself props for is the fact that I managed to get through all of this in an hour and 45, because I was really worried we were going to cross the 2 hour mark. So, yes.
Nice.
Yay me.
Yeah.
And thank all of you patrons who watched along with us in real time. We will be potentially doing this a little bit more often for the patrons, like if you guys enjoyed it, and that'll just sort of be an added bonus.
Yeah, there's still going to be the audio version if you follow us.
Yeah, we're still going to have a nice, good sound quality version from this microphone that I'll put out in the regular podcasty way. So, anyway, that is tonight's topic. Thank you, Aaron.
I'm glad I was here to listen.
You added some stuff.
I hope so.
You did.
I had a rectangle that I worked
There was
from
the whole thing, the curly phone. Like, are you sure you don't have other stuff that you wanted to impart? Because this is your last opportunity.
No, I inserted everything exactly where I felt like it needed to be.
Perfect.
There wasn't a lot of adjustment I needed to make to the excellent presentation that you made.
Now I feel like you're being.
How do you ever not feel like I'm being?
I mean, after everything I just learned with the subterfuge, I trust nothing. So there's that. Anyway, thanks everyone for listening and watching and being here and just being you. And check us out on YouTube and Patreon and whatever. The Dreamland Podcast at gmail.com.
That's right. You can send us emails.
And yeah, so that's my story. We'll catch you next time.
So long, and thanks for all the fish.
Bye.